Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Council for the Advancement of Nursing Science session about to develop daily writing habits and increase writing productivity. Hi there, my name is Akanil Talsma and I'm Associate Professor at the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. It's my pleasure to share with you this session and to share the writing tips that we have coming from our SIG. We are the mid-career special interest group and part of CANS, the Council for the Advancement of Nursing Science, which is a signature initiative of the American Academy of Nursing. Fellowship in the Academy is not required for any category of membership. CANS is a national voice for nursing science, responsible for formulating and advancing goals related to nursing and healthcare research, scientific training, learning opportunities, and career development. CANS is a partnership with the Academy, the 4 regional nursing research societies, SIGMA, and the American Nurses Foundation. The CANS special interest groups, or SIGs as we call them, are comprised of members of CANS who seek the opportunity to work, network, consult, and learn with others who share common professional interests. All members of CANS are welcome to participate in any of the SIGs, and we're so glad you're all here today. The SIGs are not designed to serve the role of a research interest group, but are similar to what's available to the regional societies or other organizations. SIGs are meant to engage members that may be nurse researchers at a similar point in their career development or engaged in a specific research role. The Mid-Career Special Interest Group SIG was founded in 2019 on the leadership of Dr. Patricia Hirschberger, and you'll be hearing from her later on today. And we work to meet the particular needs of the mid-career nurse scientists. We define the mid-career nurse scientist as someone who is in a typical academic setting at the rank of associate professor with or without tenure, and it's indicative of mid-career status. We know those definitions are maybe not applying to every organization, but that is the loose definition that we work with. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker, Dr. Annette Bourgault, who is going to speak to us for the next 30-45 minutes. And following by that, we will have the panel with Drs. Hirschberger and Stanfill. Let me do a brief introduction of Dr. Bourgault. Annette Bourgault is an associate professor at the University of Central Florida in Orlando and a nurse scientist with Orlando Health. She's also the editor of Critical Care Nurse, a journal of the American Association of Critical Care Nurses. Her main program of research focuses on feeding tube placements and complications related to enteral feeding in critically ill adults. She leads 2 faculty writing accountability groups in her college and has sustained a daily writing practice for more than 3 years now. So we're looking forward to hearing from Dr. Bourgault, and please join me momentarily. If you have questions for the speakers, would you please type them into the Q&A session as we go along? We will be reviewing your questions at the end of the panel's discussion. So please place your questions, and we're looking forward to discuss. Welcome on board.
Hi, I just want to make sure that everyone can hear me. It's there. Sorry if my video went off. Sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened, but we're back online. Okay, so hi everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I'm going to be going over developing daily writing habits to increase writing productivity. And something that we found out yesterday that I thought I'd just share with you is our journal actually just found out that we won some awards this year, Maggie Awards, which are publication awards. We won winner for Best Medical Trade Journal for August 2020 issue, and also Best Overall. So that's pretty exciting for us. So I'm going to be speaking to you more on writing from a personal basis, looking at or focusing on mid-career related to research and scholarship. These are the main topics that we'll be going over, and we're going to try and leave about 20 minutes at the end for the panel discussion. So we'll start with daily writing habits. When I first started working as faculty, it took me a while to really realize that writing is an essential part of my role. It felt like writing just kept getting bumped by everything else because there's rarely any deadlines associated with scholarly writing and publications. But yet, as faculty, we're judged on our production and dissemination and how many peer-reviewed articles we can have published. So it really is an essential part of our role. And because of that, we need to be very purposeful in making it happen.
Hey, Annette, we cannot see your slides yet. Would you please check?
I'm sorry. There were some funky things that happened at the beginning. Here we go. Let's try that again. Okay.
Yes, thank you so much.
Oh, perfect. Sorry about that. Thanks for letting me know. Okay, so I'd like to just ask you to reflect on your own writing and where did you learn to write? Did you have formal writing training or did you learn on the job like many of us or learn from your mentors or other colleagues? You know, things like writing mechanics, writing style, the publication process, which is almost foreign to most people and very intimidating to a lot of people because we don't really understand it. And then also thinking about your daily or your writing habits, and we're going to talk more about daily writing habits. So in regards to lack of writing training, Thorpe and their group found that most faculty have very novice writing skills and habits. And part of that could be because there are a lack of scientific writing courses in doctoral programs. If you think about your current writing productivity, you know, I think many of us can look at this figure and say, yep, that's what happened. I didn't get my writing done because all these other things just happened. So here's some common barriers to publication. I already mentioned that there's no formal deadlines, but some people, many of us are perfectionists, and that's not always the best quality to get your writing completed. So people have difficulty starting. People have difficulty finishing because they keep revising and never getting their work submitted. While you're trying to write, interruptions or multitasking. And I tried to look at the literature to see what the delays were with regards to multitasking. And what I was finding was each time you stop what you're doing and go to something else, you can lose up to 10 to 15 minutes of productivity trying to get your head back into what you were previously doing. And I know I sometimes try to multitask and I do it very poorly. So I believe that to be true. We all have competing priorities and also lack of purposeful planning. So time management challenges. I imagine many of you right now are saying, but I need a big block of time to write. And I used to feel that way too. I used to look for, you know, this magical 4 to 6 hour window of writing time. Well, when does that happen? Saturday afternoon? You know, it's really difficult to build that into your week. So what I'm going to do today is challenge you to think about your writing time a little bit differently. So many of us also, as I mentioned, think about writing time in these blocks of time, maybe in the evening after you put your kids to bed or on the weekend. But guess what? Writing can take time during your work time if you are purposeful about planning it. And that's not to say that I don't do any writing on my own time, but I'm making choices as well. So what I'd like to challenge you with is the daily writing challenge. Before we start, I'll just say, no, I don't write 7 days a week, but I write probably an average of 4 to 5 days a week. And I suggest that you aim for about 25 minutes a day. In the literature, other people might suggest 30 or 35 minutes. I suggest 25 because we can often make 25 minutes fit in, you know, between meetings or first thing in the morning or at any time. 25 minutes doesn't seem like a whole lot to squeeze in, but if you start making it a bigger chunk of time, then you're going to have more barriers to making that happen. And one of the things I find really neat is that once I do start writing, I get on a roll. And I often don't want to stop. So the 25 minutes often does turn into a longer writing session, but it doesn't need to. Think about rewarding yourself. You know, I negotiate with myself. Okay, even if I don't feel like writing, I'll say, come on, just do, sometimes I'll say, even just do 20 minutes. You know, after that 20 minutes, you can get another cup of coffee, or you can go for a walk, or, you know, something like that. And that has really helped me as well. Blocking interruptions is important, and also having a consistent writing location where you write best. So here's some tips now for productivity in your writing. I love this quote by J.K. Rowling: to protect your writing time. And I'm going to show you what I had on my office door. But if you have writing on your calendar, you know, you heard in the introduction that I have 2 writing groups within our faculty, and we're going to talk more about writing groups in a little bit. But those writing group times are on my calendar, and I protect them. I don't book research meetings at that time. I don't book student meetings. Those are set meetings, and we always get writing accomplished. Mentioned consistent writing locations, so making sure that your setup is ergonomic. I know during the pandemic, I've seen many of my colleagues working from their kitchen tables. That's really not ideal, but just trying to set up your work environment to be ergonomic, quiet, will improve your writing outcomes. Eliminating distractions is huge. And I know for myself, I really need to turn off the cell phone, sometimes leave it in a different room. Even turning off email has been very helpful. I don't have notifications or sounds coming from my email, but if I see the little mail icon, sometimes that's going to make me go look for something. I suggest just turning it right off while you're writing. Now, there is some literature to suggest that for being productive, that you only check your email twice a day. Maybe don't start your email first thing in the morning, because you're going to get caught up in all those little tasks following up on email when you might have spent that 25 or 30 minutes writing before you get into your email. Closing your office door. I mentioned my little sign. I had this custom sign made from Etsy. And because even if my door was closed, I would have colleagues sometimes come up and knock on my door. And it wasn't anything particularly important, you know, they just had questions, but I really needed to protect my writing time. And these days, negotiating with others in your household may be very important as well, to have a 25 or 30 minute no talking policy. I'm going to do some writing now, so you know, I'll be free at 10 o'clock to answer any questions or have a discussion about what to take out of the freezer for dinner, you know, that kind of thing. So some strategies for success are to think about blocking focus time on your calendar. This little figure that I have here, we get that from our university. It's part of, we're part of Microsoft 365, you know, with online file sharing and so on. And they send us these little updates on our productivity. I don't put a lot of weight on them, but they do send good messages about making sure you have enough productive time to block off for things like writing and scholarship. And I'm going to be talking a little bit more about the writing accountability group, tracking writing, and so on. But really what we need to do is just start writing. So let's make some plans. I define writing, when I'm talking about my daily writing, I define writing as writing for manuscripts. Some of you may be writing for book chapters, but the things I have that I don't count as writing are the things that have deadlines. Grant proposals have deadlines. Recently, I've spent far more time writing on my grant proposal than I have on my publications, but I don't count my grant writing as writing because I know it'll get done because of the deadline. Same thing for abstracts. So I just define my writing as primarily manuscript writing. This is something that may appeal to some of you and it may totally turn off others. It just depends on your style of organization. But I like to track my writing with a spreadsheet. I color code it based on articles I'm working on. Sometimes I make little notes about what I'm working on. And I'm not really sure why I write the notes, but I just do. But it's helpful for me because I, like many, are one of these people who like task lists. And I like to check things off my list. So in this case, I'm adding things rather than checking them off, but I don't like to put zeros down. That really bothers me. So I'm motivated by my own little spreadsheet here to get my daily writing done. I really want to make sure I can put down 20 or 30 minutes a day. And as you can see, some days far exceed that if I get on a roll. Manuscripts, you may have multiple papers in different phases, drafts of some, revisions going on with others. Your team may be doing revisions on some. They may be submitted to a manuscript and under review. So you can have multiple manuscripts going on at the same time. It does get a little confusing if you have too many, but it is good to have different things that you can pick up so that there's always something to be working on. So that it's not like you submit a manuscript and you have nothing to write. Just keep a little list of what are some works coming up that you could start working on, or if you're working on a new research study, could you start writing the methods section? Or there's always something that you can be working on. So some writing and editing tips. One thing that I have found very helpful is to start writing sections without citing the first time around, because I find that my writing flows much better. My paragraphs actually flow and connect a lot better because I'm telling a story. If I try to cite heavily on my first few drafts, they just sound clunky and they just don't flow. So that's one tip I would have. And the other reason for that too is that when you start citing things, I think we all know you get down that tunnel and all of a sudden you find yourself 6 papers later, how did I get here? And you haven't done anything on your paper in terms of actual writing. So that's why I'd recommend just do some writing initially. I also recommend that you work on whatever section of your paper makes you happy that day. Maybe you don't feel like working on the background section. And I mentioned earlier, you might start with your methods section, or you may make some little notes in another section. And I think that's fine. I don't have any rules for myself around that. I also, probably because of my editor role, but I think even before that, I've always been rather ruthless in editing my own papers, and I try and look at them objectively and think, what would the reviewers say and how would they pick my paper apart? How can I address these issues on the front end? Because I would much rather that me and my team pick up any issues with our papers than have it come back from peer review with a lot of things for us to address. And, you know, I had mentioned perfectionism earlier, aiming for high quality. We all know none of our work is going to be perfect. Do the best you can do, and then it's time to move that paper on either for your team to review or add to, or to actually submit. I mentioned earlier a reward system, negotiating with yourself, so I won't get into that again here. And I also use a voice app a lot. This picture you're looking at is actually a farm that's a 10-minute walk from my house, and I live in Orlando, Florida. So this is strange to me as well. But I think it's so fun to be able to take a break from walking, go for a little, 20 or 30-minute walk, take a few pictures of these guys out in the field. And as I'm walking, I'm often thinking about what I'm working on, and I'll take out my voice app and make some notes about something that might go well in the discussion section of the paper, for example. So I'm going to talk about writing accountability groups. I had mentioned that earlier. That's one thing we started doing in our college that we have found extremely helpful. And I think in 2017, we had Dr. Karupski from Johns Hopkins come to our college at for a professional development session to talk about writing accountability groups. And at the time, I think we were all highly skeptical. How can we sit in a room with other faculty who are not part of our research team and do anything productive? Well, guess what? It actually works, and it works great. So what we do is each of the writing groups meets weekly for 1 hour, and we do hold each other accountable. Now, some publications on, we'll call them WAGs, they have more rules around their WAG than we do. For example, some of them here you see have an attendance policy, or some have members write down their weekly goals. I'll talk a little bit later about the goal setting, but we decided not to have an attendance policy. Some other places say that if the member misses more than 1 or 2 meetings in a semester, that they're no longer part of the writing group. And we just felt for us that wasn't going to work, because we don't often have control over when conferences are being held and that sort of thing. So we thought it was better to have some flexibility. We have between 4 and 6 members in a group, and I think 6 I would say is the maximum, and I'll talk about that a little bit, I think, on the next slide. Also assign a group lead, and that would be somebody that just can help with some of the housekeeping issues, setting up the meetings. You know, each semester I reach out to my groups to find out when is a time that we can all meet for the semester, and we'll book everything ahead of time. And also, you might consider mentoring as part of your WAG, as some people have done. So participants in a WAG could be anyone with a common writing goal. Maybe the writing goal is just to write. It doesn't need to be the same topic. It doesn't need to be the same journal or anything. You can have no relationship with that at all. We have interdisciplinary groups. So in our college, we have some faculty who are non-nurses, and that makes no difference at all. It works great. And other authors have recommended that you organize by rank. And initially we did that because assistant professors, for example, were a little skeptical about having an associate professor in their group that might be responsible for reviewing their promotion and tenure packet. But then that only works for a little while. And over time, some of those people are going to get promoted and going to get tenured and so on. So we do have mixed groups right now of both tenured and untenured faculty. And one thing I also want to say, if you do start WAGs, don't forget about new faculty, new hires coming into your college. And that's sort of how I ended up being on 2 writing groups, because I reached out to a cohort that had started a couple of years after our writing group started. And I would also encourage you to talk to your students about WAGs. I have a student that I'm in a formal mentoring relationship with from another university, and she started her own WAG with her peers, and she reported to me that it's going very well. I wouldn't recommend that you have students in your writing group, but certainly they can take this on with their peers. So the process we use has changed due to the pandemic. We're now meeting virtually 100% of the time. But I think one of the benefits of that is that we've shown people it can work, and we might be going to more of a hybrid model after the pandemic. So what we typically do is sit at a table. Well, in the old days, sit at a table in our college. These days we're sitting at our desks, but we spend the first 10 minutes talking about our writing goals for the day, what we want to accomplish specifically, not just I'm going to sit down and write, but I'm going to work on this section. I want to get 1 paragraph done or something like that. Then we negotiate how much time we'll write for, which is usually 35, 40 minutes, depending on how much we chat at the beginning. And during that time, there is 0 talking. So if we're in person at a table, we set a timer. Nobody talks, we just write. If we're doing it virtually, what we do is turn off our microphone, turn off our video, set our timers individually, and then when that writing time is up, we reconvene. So we're still connected by Zoom or whatever platform you're using. And then we get back together for the last 10 minutes and talk about the progress we've made. And that's also a good time for the accountability piece to say, well, you've been working on that article for a while. What's your timeline for that? When are you planning to, send it to your peers for review or submit to the journal? And I find it really helpful to sort of keep on top of that, because it makes people think a little bit more and it holds them accountable for getting their writing done. So some unintended consequences of WAG for us certainly has been peer mentoring. We share tips with each other. We celebrate our success. Some of my WAG team members will send me emails between WAGs. Oh, my paper got accepted, or, I'm doing revisions, or, good things that are happening. But we also share rejections. And I think rejections is really important to be transparent about, because the more you talk to people have had manuscripts rejected, and it's so good to know that you're not alone and that you can survive this. And that doesn't mean you're a bad scientist if your paper gets rejected. Maybe that just means you needed to clarify things a little better, or just need to reframe things. So I think it is important to share the rejection pieces as well. During the pandemic, the social connection piece was huge for us. A week after the pandemic started, we took our writing groups into the virtual platform, and we've met every week since. And it's been really a tremendous way to keep connected. And I have found that when I get my own writing done first in the day, I think I'm a much nicer grader, and I think my students probably appreciate that too. So here from some other studies, people have measured their outcomes related to WAG, and you can see that the volume of publications have increased. Now, I think that'd be a hard thing to track because there's a lot of other variables there as people are getting their programs of research up and running and so on. You would expect that they would have more data and things to write about, but still, a number of different authors have reported increase in publications. Skarupski and Foucher said that writing time increased. So before their WAG started, they said 18% of their faculty were writing on a daily basis. After the WAGs, up to 75% of their faculty were writing on a daily basis. So I would probably anticipate that their productivity in terms of publications has increased as well. This is just showing you that the time per writing session, remember I talked about writing in big blocks of time. They're just showing that people are writing, after they got used to doing the writing accountability groups and daily writing, that people are writing in shorter blocks of time. And you would be surprised when we set our timers for 30 or 40 minutes in our writing group, when the timers go off and people reconvene, almost everyone is saying, I can't believe it's already 30 minutes, or I can't believe our writing time is over. I was in such a roll. So it's really good to hear that people get into their writing and really can get connected with their material in that short period of time. And I find that with daily writing, it also keeps things fresh in my brain so that my brain is working on my writing even when I'm not really thinking about it consciously. Like I mentioned I was out for a walk, so I'm taking a picture of a zebra and my brain says, aha, this would be good for the discussion part of the paper. So it goes into the voice app so I don't lose it. So before we break for our panel discussion, this is the last section of the presentation. We'd like to talk about strategies to facilitate team writing, because most of us that are doing research are not doing it in silos. We have often interdisciplinary teams and people at different institutions. So it becomes a challenge. Prior to the way I'm going to share with you now, I was doing, sending around manuscripts to my teams by email. So I ended up with a lot of different versions coming back and forth, and it just got confusing. And I'm sure many of you share in that confusion with me. So I'm going to show you what we worked on recently. When I say we, this is members of our mid-career SIG, a large number of us collaborated on a manuscript, and we're happy to say it's not accepted yet, but we really had very positive reviews, and we're currently doing some revisions on it, very minor revisions. But we used a different process for sharing the document and doing our writing. And from my perspective, it worked really great. I was first author on the paper, so I'll talk a little bit about what that looked like as well. And then if you have questions about it during the panel discussion, it may be good to ask some of the others how it worked from their perspective. So what we used is we shared cloud files through Microsoft SharePoint, and they can be shared with people outside of your institution. I've also used Google Docs in the past, but I find the Google Docs platform a little bit clunky because you can't use EndNote or Reference Manager software with that. So at least with Microsoft SharePoint, I'm still working in my Word document. As first author, I can still add my citations, and I just found that much easier to use. One of the things I love is that multiple people can write simultaneously. I've also used this for grant applications, and a couple weeks ago, before one of our grant meetings, I was working on our grant proposal, And I could see, if you go up to the right-hand side of the screen in this Microsoft SharePoint, you can see initials. So I can see, for me, AB is in the document. But I could also see that another 3 or 4 people on my team were in the document at the same time. And if I hold my mouse over their initials, it even says, so-and-so is on page 12. I don't need to micromanage to that degree, but I think it's pretty neat that you know what people are working on. And once people are into the document, I think we all start to get email updates about comments that are put on the articles, which is helpful because there may be something that you need to answer. So I don't think it's that important really as an author, whether you open all these emails with the comments, because you can also go into the document when it's time for you to do your writing and access everything you need that way as well. So with using one document only, we use the track changes feature on Microsoft Word. We also use comments. And one thing I just want to say out loud that you need to talk to people about when you start is to avoid saving the file using a different file name, because then you'll have multiple copies of the same document. So just keep allowing the main document to save over and over when you're done. As the first author, I would periodically make a copy of that just to make sure that we didn't lose any work. But I've used it now multiple times and I haven't lost anything. So I've been quite pleased with it so far, but I would still do backup copies regularly. So the process then, as with any teamwork, is needing to set your goals and set target dates. And I found most teams that I work with, when we're doing group writing, 2 weeks seems to be an adequate amount of time for most people to review and give feedback, or do a section of writing and then lead to the revisions. So 2 weeks seems to work well, but still make sure you have those discussions with your group and make sure you have those dates in writing so you can keep everybody on track. And also up front, agree on a process for how you're going to deal with citations and references. What I find easiest, even if I'm working with journals or a grant that uses AMA, if I'm writing with multiple people, I'll tell them that if I'm first author, I'll use my reference manager software. But when they add a citation, just put in the author and the year, or whatever amount of information I need to get the reference, and then put the full reference at the very end of the document so that I can go back in later and fix that up. And then, of course, like anything, when you're writing, you want to discuss authorship very early on, because it is tricky. And the paper I was just talking about with our SIG, we had 10 authors. And yes, it can be done, but we had to sort of establish our process, and it evolved over time, but I think it worked really well. So authorship, if you're not familiar, the ICJME author criteria are really helpful to determine who is an author and who is not an author. So not everybody who is doing research in your study needs to be an author. Some people might fall into the acknowledgement category. So I would advise you to have a look at that, because that's very helpful as well. With large teams, like we had 10 people on that paper, we had established some authorship in advance. Certainly you need to know who's leading the paper, who will be first author, but I think we had established the first and second author, and then the lead at the end. And in between was fuzzy. So we needed, we said that we would establish the order of authors based on contributions, but that's also an objective measure. One of my colleagues has a rubric for authorship. I've looked at it. It looks interesting to me, but it also looks like a make work project. So it just depends how your team works best. For some of you, the rubric might work well. For me, I was hoping to avoid it because that just seemed like another layer of work. And then, I'm sure you're also aware that before submission, all authors need to confirm the final copy of the paper, title page, credentials, and all of that stuff. So as first author, I was responsible for keeping the revisions going. and also trying to find a common voice in the paper, because we actually had all 10 of us writing paragraphs and sections for this paper. And I think over time that went well, but it did take a number of revisions. And it also was a bit of work for me. I'm used to being an editor for journal. I'm used to editing other papers, research papers that I'm working on, but I'm not used to editing papers where we have 10 different authors. So that was a new process for me, but I think with a few rounds of revisions, it came together, and it does read like it's one consistent voice. I've already mentioned saving backup copies just in case. I also, by email, would send reminders after each revision round was completed, and also confirm where we're at in the process, what our end goal is, turnaround time for revisions, what needed to be done, that sort of thing. And I think I probably failed to mention that when you do the cloud-based sharing, once you enter people's email addresses into the share section, it will send them an email. So make sure you talk to your authors about this first so that they don't think it's spam mail, because there's not very much that's personalized on there depending on how you've set it up. So now we're going to move into the panel discussion part of our presentation. And this is an opportunity for your questions and answers, and also for our panel to share some additional writing tips with you. And I'll just remind you that there's the Q&A box that you can enter your questions into. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Burgal, for this fabulous presentation. It's very inspiring to hear about the successes and how the process has been working. And I've been a member of the 10 people team, and I have to say it worked well. It was fun, and looking forward to start using some of these tips. I'd like to briefly introduce Dr. Patricia Hirschberger, Associate Professor at the University of Illinois at Chicago, is one of our panel members, and also Professor Stanfill, Nancy Stanfill, Associate Professor and Associate Dean of Research at the University of Tennessee. Thank you for joining us here. And let's start with the panel discussions. Maybe Patricia, I'll ask you first to comment, and any other thoughts, questions you have for Annette.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much, Dr. Burgal. That was really fabulous, and really appreciate your insight. So just to get us started on a discussion, is there anything that maybe that you've tried that hasn't worked that you might share with all of us? I know you have great information about kind of this is what works, but things that you've tried that haven't.
I think for me, sharing documents by email doesn't work as well. And having, especially if you have a large number of co-authors that are doing revisions, if they all do revisions on their own copy, and then you have 5 or 6 copies to try and merge, that seems like a lot of additional work. I'm always scared I'm going to miss things. And this way we've all experienced online. To me, just it avoided all of that extra work, I think. Yeah, I'm trying to think what hasn't worked. Well, I'll tell you right now, I'm writing a grant, and our version of EndNote changed 2 weeks ago. That didn't work so well, but I'm getting used to it. Things are out of our control sometimes, though. But what about some of you? I'm interested to hear what maybe hasn't worked or what has worked.
So I will say that for me, daily writing, I know it works for many people. It doesn't work well for me. I like setting aside, and I actually block it on my calendar. So the little metrics that you had with the OneDrive and Microsoft Office products, those are actually a little bit skewed for me, because I will block out on Friday afternoons. I make myself a giant cup of tea. I light a candle, it is my writing time, and I have to write in big blocks. But I will say that sometimes as you progress through different career stages, what worked for me as a doctoral student didn't work for me as a postdoc, didn't work for me as an assistant professor, and now is challenging for me as an associate professor. So revisiting some of the things that didn't work before may actually work at a different career stage.
Good points.
Yeah, if I could just reiterate that, I was thinking as well that as my career has unfolded, I've tried different strategies and done different things. So, so those of you listening out there, that has worked for me. I've actually documented my time, just like Dr. Brideau was showing. Then I found that it almost took too much time for me to document my time, so I moved away from that. So I guess I've tried a variety of things. One of the things also that wasn't mentioned that maybe I want to share, but perhaps touched on a bit, was that I've also bought into some of this more positive frame of work, which has shown that if you really come looking at your work positively, that you will actually be more productive. So, and I think, Annette, in some of our maybe email conversations, you've shared some of that with me, that you kind of picked up on trying to be positive and keep your team positive. And hopefully that will, as the psychological research is showing, will allow your team and yourself to be more productive too.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing.
So we have a couple of questions in the Q&A session, and there are some questions are more on the technical logistics way of doing things. The other one is a little bit more on the content. So let me start out with the technical ones. Someone's asking, I'm not faculty. What are your thoughts about including non-faculty members to your WAG?
Well, I can start and say we have a couple of new members in one of our WAGs that are not in our tenure earning line. They're clinical instructors, but they still have expectations for scholarship as well. So I think it depends on having common goals. If they're committed to writing and learning about writing, for us, it's been a good fit.
Thank you. The other question related to that is, I'm a new faculty member and starting this summer. What is the optimum number of participants for a WAG? How much work is it to lead one? Would you suggest that for a new faculty? And how, do you get administrative support to schedule this and set the time aside for it?
Yeah, before I talk, is anyone else involved in a WAG that would like to answer that?
I can certainly answer. So I will say that the optimum number of participants depends a little bit on the experience level of those participants. So in my college at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center in Memphis, we have some different writing groups that are surrounded around particular research topics. And so when those include a lot of junior faculty, they tend to be a bit smaller. When it's more senior, mid-career type faculty members, they tend to get a little bit bigger. And so I don't know that there's a necessarily perfect number. Certainly, the bigger, the more challenging it can be to sort of herd the cats in the correct direction for whoever the lead author is or for the organizer of that. But it just depends a little bit on the topic matter, and then also the experience level of those particular faculty that are involved. And
perhaps if I can just add to just a couple different things, because I think the question originated around non-faculty members. Mm-hmm. And I may be a little bit more senior as an associate professor, but I actually teach doctoral students. And to me, the way I've structured the course, it's almost like a WAG. It's not officially called that, but students, of course, are doing writing outside of this particular course. Then when we meet, it's almost like an accountability. I actually had included an undergraduate student who was highly motivated that I also allowed in that particular, in one of my particular classes. So that's kind of a way that I've unofficially used WAGs. Another way to use WAGs is that I almost think of my research team as a WAG, even though it's not officially called that. But we get together for our research meetings, and then I allow some of our research meeting to be set aside for what manuscripts we're working on, how we want to roll those manuscripts out is discussed, all of the things that Dr. Burgo was talking about. Even in fact, before we even start, what journal do we want to target? Do we want to go high and even though risk rejection? Or maybe for this particular manuscript that we might be writing, maybe we want to roll it out quickly and really get it to the journal that we think is the most likely to look favorably on what we're presenting.
Thank you. That's
just kind of adding to that WAG discussion.
Yeah, I think maybe it would also be helpful to speak to you if you're a new incoming tenure track faculty. Should you start your own WAG, or would you suggest to find some other mates to work with?
Yeah, I would suggest, you may already know the answer to this, but I would suggest that you reach out to some of the faculty who are already at your new school and see, are there already writing groups that you can join? Because I think all of us would give advice to new faculty to reduce your administrative and service burden so that you can focus on getting your program of research up and going. But I will say, though, as somebody who runs a couple of WAGs, it really isn't a time commitment other than trying to get the schedule together. And I don't have administrative help with that. That's just, a quick doodle poll, and I set up the meetings for the semester. So that may be half an hour of my time, but I would suggest reaching out to your new colleagues first to see if they have something in place.
One of the things that we do at my university is with our writing groups around particular research topics, the expectation is that our junior faculty will join and then learn sort of the process. And then if they want to, perhaps after they've gotten a couple of manuscripts under their belt, they've gotten some funding, if they want to start one, then they sort of know the process to be able to form their own groups. And that's been a pretty successful pipeline for us at my university.
Yeah, some other questions have come in. How do you resolve a conflict if two writers do not agree on the direction of the manuscript, or if one or two members of your team are not contributing enough? How do you handle that? And is there a way to disqualify someone from authorship? I know these are sticky items, but I'm glad the questions are raised because they can really take a lot of time and energy to resolve.
For sure. So with the conflict on the direction, that can be a really sticky situation. And it depends on, to some extent, what the conflict is about. It depends to some extent on who the lead author is and what their thoughts are on that. And so I tend to aim towards a bit of transparency in these sorts of things, that I let people really know the direction of both arguments and go from there.
I would suggest as well, again, depending on the level of disagreement, if it's something simple that some communication with your team can sort out, that's really best. But if it becomes something much more serious than that, you may not be aware of COPE, publication ethics. I think it's Commission on Publication Ethics. They have a number of algorithms for authors, editors, reviewers that people can work through. So that may help you as well to go find some of those algorithms at the COPE website.
Yeah, these are, if I could just add too, those are great suggestions. I have also had some issues with authorship, especially with some of my physician colleagues. So I have used the international guidelines that Dr. Burgo mentioned during the presentation and kind of educate some of my co-authors about the requirements for being a co-author. That has worked well. I have also, if I notice perhaps I'm writing with a group and I'm the lead author and I notice there's some feelings, maybe someone isn't contributing or keeping up with deadlines, oftentimes I will reach out to that person outside of our group or team meeting. Pre-COVID, I'd like to talk to people face to face, but reaching out to them kind of one-on-one just to see maybe what's going on. Do they have a sick parent, a sick child? Is something happening? Or perhaps are they just maybe too busy, and would they like not to be part of that particular manuscript, maybe, moving forward, but perhaps they could join in another manuscript later. So I found that has been an effective way to resolve some conflicts too.
Yeah. So another sticky discussion item could be, where are we going to publish? And what decisions have you made, and how is that discussion happening? Is that the lead author who makes that decision, or is that a team or a group decision?
I would say in my world, it's usually a team decision. I think the lead author does kind of get a little bit more voice in that. I will say some ideas for selecting, like I saw some of the chat questions were about like where you actually submit. One of my first pass ideas is I actually look at my own reference list and the article that I wrote, and I see where I'm tending to cite. And then I'll go to that journal first and see, have they actually published something in this particular area? And if they have, then I'll go to the second journal, because they probably aren't going to publish it if they've recently published a very similar article. But they obviously, if I've cited them quite a lot, they're obviously interested in the same topic that I'm interested in.
It's a great strategy.
I would just add, if I'm not writing solo, which most of the time I'm not, I write as a team. So I do like to discuss, especially if I'm lead author, with my ideas. And as Dr. Grimes Stanfield said, I think that's great, looking at the reference list. Sometimes I will consider, if it's really my main goal of perhaps that research project, I will consider what's maybe the highest journal that we want to go for. What's the most difficult journal? What's our highest target journal? And then I'll talk with my team about, do we think that the data we have and the manuscript we're preparing is a good fit for that high level journal? And we might shoot for that, knowing that we might be rejected, but it might be worth a try. And oftentimes we'll have like a plan A for, this is our high level journal, and maybe a backup plan B in case we get rejected. Sometimes though, on occasion, when we get to maybe what I would say are subcomponent manuscripts, when we're writing off a large data set, or perhaps like a literature review article, we might say, you know what, we need to get this manuscript submitted within, say, a month. So knowing that, we might then, that might also factor in to the journal that where we want to submit it to. And I don't know if all journal editors like hearing that, but I think my team looks at typically the time it takes, how strong our data set is. Because we know, for example, if it's a small qualitative data set, maybe that's better in a particular journal versus a large quantitative data set that we're reporting on. So if that's helpful to any of you listening, that's some of the things that come to the top of my mind.
I would add to that as well. I do look at how many issues a journal puts out in a year. I may not know their backlog. Some disclose that on their websites and others don't, but that's another consideration. If you submit, let's say you submit, go through the review process and it gets accepted today, is it going to be published in 4 months or 14 months? That could make a really big difference. The other thing too that I sometimes consider, because I do a lot of clinical research, is who is my target audience? Because a lot of the work that I do, I want to get out to bedside critical care nurses, and they're not usually the ones who are in the databases seeking the research articles. So I've published a fair bit in the American Journal of Critical Care, because I know that AACN, all members get a hard copy of that journal delivered to their homes. So they may be more likely, they being the clinical nurses, may be more likely to see it.
Thank you.
But I will say it's definitely a team decision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then, in your experience, have you seen new research ideas or proposals be developed as part of the WAC? Does it has opened up doors that then propel you forward? I see yours nodding. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's actually one of the benefits is that sometimes you get the snowball effect that you know are having your meeting beforehand. You're all bouncing ideas off of each other, and it's like, oh, that doesn't really fit in this manuscript, but we should. And then I've brought to different teams that I've written with, oh, I just found this grant application. Oh, I just found this abstract submission that would fit really well with that idea we had last week. And so it actually becomes this sort of self-propelling engine after some time. When you get a good group together and everybody's bringing those ideas, it can be very, very productive very quickly.
Thank you. Thank you. I see we have a couple more minutes and we have a couple quick questions, but go ahead, Dr. Bago.
I just want to make a quick distinction. It sounds like we have different types of WAGs, which is terrific, but the one Ansley's talking about is much more focused on a certain area of research from what I'm hearing, where the WAG that we have, everyone is working with different research teams than each other. So we don't work with each other. We're just writing together. So it's a different experience, but we all have our personal writing outcomes.
Right. So then one of the questions that came out, and maybe more for you, Ansley, is what do you do about a non-productive member?
Sure. So I kind of use a similar strategy that Dr. Hirschberger described. I really like for those conversations to happen face to face. Most of the time when I've had a truly non-productive, somebody that's maybe just not a little bit late here and there, but somebody that truly is kind of checked out of the whole process, a lot of times when you sit them down, you say, hey, what's going on? You find out that they were in over their head in some way, whether personally, professionally, something is going on. And oftentimes more than not, those particular individuals are like, I'd be happy to bow out. And they just almost needed somebody to acknowledge and to see them. And so a lot of times that can be helpful, or they may not be aware. And I actually had a situation recently where I was working with a team and I had that non-productive person. Well, it turns out I had her email address wrong. And so she never got any of the communications for the group. And so that's why she never showed up. And so it became a little bit of a funny accident. And going and speaking to that person individually really helped to clear up the situation. I think people, most faculty members, most people that are going to join these groups, whether they're students or staff or clinical faculty, however they wind up joining, are going to really want to be productive. And so oftentimes there's a reason behind a lack of productivity.
Any other comments on that?
No, but I was just going to say quickly, I can see some of the questions in the lineup. Some people are asking about writing requirements for different lines of faculty, clinical versus tenure earning. And yes, there's different criteria that are established by the university and then by the college. So every college will be different. And somebody else said, do you have a target number of publications you aim for each year? I would say yes, but it also depends. Right. Certainly we have a minimum number for promotion, but it really depends. And I would defer to the others on that as well.
So if you want to give a quick reply, and then we might need to tie it up. Go ahead.
So the question was how many publications per year? It definitely depends on your ranking, your particular university. I know that anytime I submit a grant, I expect at least one application, even if it's only a $1,500 grant, there should be a publication at the end of that. If I give a presentation, I expect that it gets turned into some sort of manuscript eventually. Perhaps I may combine two presentations together to create that manuscript, but it all eventually. So there's not a really good answer to that question. Bigger grants are going to have more publications attached to them.
Dr. Hirschberger, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's right. The only thing maybe that hasn't been said yet to add is that I do think through the research process, there are certain times when I'm working more on data analysis, and then other times when I'm really working on publications. So sometimes it kind of ebbs and flows.
Great. And we are at time. We'd like to inform you that the recording and PowerPoint will be made available to us. And I for sure will share that with my students as well. So you can do it with the link. And we suggest you go back to nursingscience.org and the information will be there shortly. Thank you so much for all your participation and for the speakers today. It was really helpful, informative, and we hope that you will also look for us at the upcoming conferences and joining our events and webinars as we are continue developing them. And we'd love to connect with you and do our research together and network. And we hope we have an opportunity to do it at our future conferences. With that, I know we are reaching time. Once again, Happy Nurses Week. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we're looking forward to seeing you at another event and hopefully soon at one of our conferences. Take care. Bye.